great yard, but then you have horrific numbers when the guy's not on the field. And then when he was suspended, how bad it was. Can't do it.
The tournament is only hours away. Do you have enough betting knowledge in your bag to cash tickets on Sunday? Join our golf betting experts as they expose value for bettors by analyzing the course, the field, and the matchups. Improve your handicapping with long shots. Ladies and gentlemen, now on the tee, Brady Cannon, Matt Humans, and Wes Reynolds.
Good evening and welcome to Long Shots. It's Brady Cannon here alongside Wes Reynolds and Matt Humans. We have made it to the end of the regular season. Just 4 more weeks remain on Long Shots as we wind down towards the Tour Championships, the FedEx Cup playoffs beginning next week. But one more regular season tour event to go, and that is the Wyndham Championship taking place in Greensboro, North Carolina. And once again, I want to remind you the show is brought to you by the Westgate Resort and Casino, our sponsor all year long. Thank you very much to them. Before we get into the preview of the Wyndham Golf Championship down in Greensboro, we bring in a guest, Ryan Brickley, to do that with us in the second segment. We do want to look back on the World Golf Championship, the FedEx St. Jude Invitational last week at TPC Southwind in Memphis. I thought it was a great tournament, gentlemen. Obviously, you had a tremendous field there, 45 out of the top 50 players in the world, and then you get a final pairing on Sunday with Brooks Koepka and Rory McIlroy, and Mr. Koepka did something other than win a major.
Yeah, exactly, and he beat Rory McIlroy pretty solidly to boot. And you thought maybe Rory might step up in the moment, but he really did not. My closest one was a second-place finish with Webb Simpson, who basically just kind of ran out of holes. And Brooks Koepka decided he was going to be serious this week and apparently was battling a little bit of an illness. I think arrived 45 minutes before his tee time in the final round and still went out there and proved that he is, in fact, the best player in the world. And the fact that he's taking other events seriously makes him very dangerous.
I would say absolutely. Matt, I don't know if you looked at the odds, the adjusted odds going into the final round, but I kind of look back and seeing Koepka at, 2.5 to 1 or so, trailing by one shot. I was stupid not to jump on it.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Wes said you thought Rory was going to step up. I never really think Rory's going to step up. I need to see him do it. He rarely does it. He did it once early this season. Where was it, Wes? In Canada?
And the Players' Championship where he was able to win. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, he doesn't do it enough for a player of his caliber.
This is a type of final round I was hoping we would see at the British Open, where Rory and Koepka and some of the big names were going head-to-head. And the British Open final round was boring. It was a snooze fest. And actually, last week you had, I thought, more drama in the final round. And that's kind of what I was hoping to see in the year's final major. It's strange because at this time of year, typically we're talking about the PGA up next, and we have one more major to look forward to. And it kind of feels like in a strange sense that the golf season's over. And it's football season now and time to move on, but that's not the case. We still have some important golf tournaments left.
Well, we do, and credit to the PGA. I'm still pretty fired up about these last 3 or 4 weeks. This is a real big week this week as guys are trying to keep their tour card, and then we've got the final, 3 weeks of playoffs, and eventually the Tour Championship in Atlanta with just 30 guys in the field, and we're going to crown a Player of the Year and a FedEx Cup champion, and all of that happens before the very first college football game even kicks off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's probably, I guess, and I was a little skittish about it in terms of moving all these tournaments up, but it's really probably a good thing for the tour to do that. I mean, the real loser in this is probably the European Tour because so many of their events now get back-ended into the fall. So, and then plus with the Olympics coming next year, that's going to change the schedule again. So that moves Memphis up to the first week of July, which means the Irish Open. That's usually the slot on the European Tour 2 weeks for the British Open. And now all these top 50 players are going to be in Memphis and not in Ireland. So it'll be interesting to see how the European Tour kind of messes around with their schedule to accommodate it.
With it being an Olympic year, That really fouled things up 4 years ago or 3 years ago, I guess, when we had the PGA Championship at Baltusrol and Jimmy Walker won that. It just didn't really feel like a major championship. And so the Olympics, I think, really throw a wrench into the schedule. But generally, I think the schedule this year is great, and next year it'll be great again. You just have that one little blip where there's only 3 tournaments between the U.S. Open and the British.
Yeah. Yeah, because they moved. The Olympics is going to be the first week of August next year in Japan, in Tokyo. So that I don't like having majors compressed together, and we see that on the other tours, the Champions Tour, the LPGA Tour. I like there to be a little bit of a month to kind of lead up to it, let guys get in some form, and but I mean, with the compressed schedule, that's kind of what you're going to get.
Other than the British Open and the U.S. Open, between those two, every other major has 5 weeks between it, which I think is cool. And going forward in a non-Olympic year, I assume they'll revert back to that, where there is 4 tournaments in between 2 majors. I think that gives guys some time and still, allows you to build to that crescendo of a major championship and get some hype and some publicity and some excitement heading in. There should be an excitement for a lot of people this week in Greensboro, North Carolina. Some guys will have their jobs on the line. The FedEx Cup standings, it's the top 125 in the standings after this event concludes on Sunday, and those guys will advance to the FedEx Cup playoffs, and they also retain their tour card for 2020. The other 75 guys or so are going to have to struggle through the Korn Ferry Tour, the minor leagues, if you will, and try and place there in order to keep their card for the next year, and all of that will be decided as far as the points this week in Greensboro. And Wes, there's a lot of guys that we say are on the bubble right around that 125 mark that have a very important week ahead of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you look at some guys, some notable guys that are outside the FedEx 125 that you wouldn't expect. Danny Berger, Jason Duffner, Martin Keimer, Zach Johnson, Jimmy Walker. These are guys that are all outside looking in right now. 4 of those guys are major champions and relatively recent major champions within the last few years. So it's highly competitive out there. And, I mean, you've got guys that aren't even full-time tour status members winning tournaments and earning it that way, like Morikawa did, like Matt Wolff did. So Victor Hovland has a chance to also do that this week. And if he can, I believe he'll qualify and get his status. If he finishes at least tied for second, he'll get full status and not have to go on to the Korn Ferry Tour Finals, which the top 75 from that tour and then the 126 to 200 from the PGA Tour are in those finals events to kind of determine priority status for their cards and which tournaments they get in and so on and so forth.
Matt, for this tournament, these guys that are on the bubble, these guys that are going to be pressing to finish inside the top 125 this week, would you like to back them or fade them? Do you think the pressure's too much, or do you think they can step up?
I don't think it's too much pressure. In fact, I would expect those guys to step up. This is a Wyndham Championship. It's not a major. If you can't handle that sort of pressure, you wouldn't be a pro golfer. So I would expect more. I would look at that more as a positive factor when you're handicapping. What about you, Wes?
Yeah, I mean, when the money's on the line and the pressure, I mean, if you want to make it out on this tour and want to have a chance to play in big majors and big time pressure events, you got to be able to deal with this and keep your card and keep grinding and stay out there. So I think it's more of a positive than a negative as well.
One guy, Wes, that I think is curious is Martin Keimer. We saw him going into the British Open. He had failed to qualify for that major, broke a streak of many years of competing in straight major championships for Keimer, who last won the U.S. Open in 2014. And he was, kind of pressing the last couple events on the European Tour to finish top 10, whatever he needed to do. And he came up short. And then he wasn't all that good last week in Reno at the Barracuda. And now he's got one more shot. And, I don't know if I would be backing this guy this week, because so far when he's had that, sink or swim on the line, he's sunk.
Keimer is a bit of a different case, too, because he will at least keep European Tour status. So it's not like a guy where it's like, well, I don't have any status. I mean, I'm sure he would probably try to play in the Korn Ferry Finals to keep his PGA status, but he does have European Tour status at least to fall back on. I mean, some of these guys that might have just gotten out here last year from the thenweb.com tour are fighting to stay on the tour, and this is their moment, and this is their week to do that.
What about you, Matt? Who you backing this week? What kind of players are you looking at for the Wyndham?
Not really sure. I'm looking more at long shots here. I think this sets up as kind of a wide open tournament. I'm looking more in the range of guys like Scott Piercy at 60-1, Joaquin Niemann at 40-1. I'm not looking at any of the top 8 guys on the board, and I think to find value on the futures board in a tournament like this, you have to go deeper than the top 10. I don't want to play Webb Simpson or Matsuyama, any of these guys at the top. I know Wes likes Patrick Reed. I can't stand him. I wouldn't even consider playing him here. I would start probably at Cameron Smith at number 30, 30-1 on the odds board, and just look deeper. And that's actually the way I'm going to attack this one. Some of these events, I believe, are difficult to handicap. Who had Shane Lowry as the winner going into the British Open?
Probably a few more pre-flop than
just a handful of people.
Right.
I mean, we talked about the British at length on this show, and I'm not sure anybody mentioned Shane Lowry. That week. We talked about all the players from Ireland, Northern Ireland, but not Shane Lowry. In a tournament like this, I think you're just kind of guessing on the futures board. Scott Piercy's the guy I played early in the season, and he didn't really come through. He was in the hunt. Wes talked about him earlier today on a show we did on VSiN. I was close. I felt like I was close with Scott Piercy a couple times. He's got some numbers, some recent form, I think, that indicates he could be a pretty good bet this week at around 60-1. So those are the type of guys I'm looking at in the Wyndham.
He's had an outstanding season, has Scott Piercy.
But he hasn't closed out a win yet.
True. Finished third at the Heritage, I think, when both you and I had him.
Yep.
Wes, I want to ask you, Webb Simpson named his daughter Wyndham, for God's sakes. He won this tournament. It was his first PGA Tour win and named his daughter Wyndham. That's how much he likes it here. Would you bet him in matchups? I know it's a short price at 10-1, Wes, but you could get some matchups with him, maybe minus 130 or so. Would you play Webb Simpson? I mean, there's almost no better tournament to figure he's a horse for the course.
He's a guy definitely playing matchups, and if you have DraftKings like DFS available to you, he'll be one of the higher salaried guys. He'd be one I'd try to build a lineup around when you consider second last year, third in 2017, sixth in 15, fifth in 14, and also won this event 2011. He, of course, is a Wake Forest graduate, like another guy that's going to be on my card. That's a longer shot this week, and that's Billy Haas at 100-1. So he comes to a familiar course that I will think he would like, but I can't bet. I mean, I had him last week, but David Dorman, who's a loyal listener and subscriber to VSiN, tweeted me last week, and he goes, "Are you going to be on Webb?" I go, "Maybe. I got to see the price. I think it's going to come pretty short," and sure enough, it did at 10-1. So I'm not going to necessarily back him here. Reed was the shortest price guy I liked. Another guy that Matt actually hit earlier this year that I kind of like this week is Ches Reavie at 40-1, who, when I was compiling, kind of looking at all the stats, I was like, this guy's all over the place in terms of driving accuracy, in terms of greens and regulation. So he's one that makes sense. Piercy, Russell Henley, who loves the Bermuda, and he's going to get that this week, the Bermuda greens at 60-1. Doc Redman is another one I also mentioned with Matt earlier this afternoon, 80-1. Only 21 years old, won the U.S. Amateur a couple years ago. And he'll like this. He's a Clemson golfer, so he's played in the Carolinas a lot. So he was a guy I looked at. Sepp Straka at 100-1. So there's plenty of guys out there that are in some solid form that are going to be higher prices that you can probably use in your lineups or matchups or futures boards.
And we've seen a lot of first-time winners get their victory here at the Wyndham Championship, so certainly an opportunity for some first-timers and some long shots. Ches Reavie, the only thing I didn't like about him is he's missed a lot of cuts here in the past before. It hasn't been a course that has suited him in the past, but again, this guy won on tour this year earlier, and I think the game has changed for Ches Reavie. He's playing with a lot of of confidence right now. And I mentioned earlier, we want to thank the Westgate Resort and Casino for sponsoring this show all season long. This is home to the world-famous Superbook and NFL Super Contest. You've heard us reference this iconic Las Vegas Resort and Casino thousands of times here on VSiN, and now we want you to experience this classic piece of Las Vegas history for yourself. Located adjacent to the Las Vegas Convention Center, one block off the Strip and across the street from amazing golf at the historic Las Vegas Country Club, Westgate Las Vegas Resort and Casino offers the finest amenities, spacious rooms, world-famous dining options, and legendary performers like nowhere else. In addition to the property's decorated history, fantastic shows, expansive gaming floor, and of course the Superbook, Westgate Las Vegas Resort and Casino guests are given special access to the exclusive private golf club, Las Vegas Country Club, located right out the hotel's back door. Play where Dean Martin teed it up, where both the PGA and LPGA tours have held professional tournaments. The Las Vegas Country Club is like no other course in the desert, with its tree-lined fairways, glistening water features, and park-like setting. Book your stay and play today at Westgate Las Vegas. That's westgatevegas.com, westgatevegas.com, or call 702-732-5631, 702-732-5631, and make your next reservation in Las Vegas quite a super booking. We'll be back on Long Shots. Keep it here on VSiN, VSiN.com, and SiriusXM Channel 204.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
How much in the terms of momentum or legs does the 18-game, 16 per player maximum have?
I can't imagine that Tom Brady's going to miss 2 games. I just can't fathom that you have a starting quarterback and you got to rest him for 2 games. And what that would look like is everybody would rest their quarterbacks first 2 weeks of the season and then play the rest of the year. I mean, why I'm not, or maybe rest them in week 17 when the game doesn't matter if you think you can get there. But it's either early or late, but you can't rest them in October or November. There's too much at stake.
So is that shaded a little bit shorter considering there's a lot of smart minds behind the Cornhuskers this year?
Well, let me give all the credit for all this college football stuff to Ed Salmons, our senior college football guy here at the Superbook. And I know Ed and I both really like Nebraska this season. Talk about a team that, as bad as they started, they closed out so well at the end of last year. Mm-hmm. And that's such a mark of a great coach. And Scott Frost did such a great job with Central Florida, and he really had that team turned around by the end of last season. I don't see any reason why Nebraska won't win the Big Ten.
Real quickly, we didn't touch upon Stanford, a team that's always a challenger in the Pac-12, but I think this is going to be a down year. They lose a ton of talent. One of my favorite players in college football last year, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, he's gone. I'm not going to discount, though, the job that their coaching staff does there.
Yeah, what they are the outliers, right? So everybody's running spread, and they're in 2 tight ends running the ball, and their pad level's down. And so to get ready to play them, right, to get ready to play Stanford, you're a school that you're Arizona, and you're in spread all the time. How do you get your defense ready to play Stanford? You have no real players on your team that can show you what the offense looks like in a real concise manner and an effective manner. So they're the outlier. They were New England. New England became this last year. Who was running the football? And I think that's the big thing. I'm just not in love with KJ Costello. I mean, I know people have him as the second best. I don't. I mean, I think there's some issues with his accuracy, and I do think it'll be a down year. It'll be interesting to see where David is with this program right now.
Yeah, I agree.
David Shaw, I meant.
One of my favorite things about Stanford, they're like the service academies. You can always guarantee they're not going to get dumb penalties.
Yeah, that's right. Smart players.
Absolutely right.
I mean, what was your low? How bummed were you at that moment? Were you just super dejected, or were you okay with it?
It's a funny story. So when right after the taping finished, and I kind of had to go sign my forms to collect my second place money, one of the producers came up to me and she gave me a hug, and she actually started crying because she said she had never seen anyone play the game so beautifully before, and I had to kind of pat her on the back and comfort her.
That's amazing.
Experience was ending.
Wow.
But I would say it was kind of a bittersweet moment. Obviously, I wasn't happy to lose, but at the same time, it was getting a little stressful going back there every week, and I was kind of like I had put this achievement, checked it off the bucket list.
Welcome back to Long Shots, VSiN's weekly golf betting show. Now, back to your betting caddies, Brady Cannon, Matt Humans, and Wes Reynolds.
Rated a top 5 golf course in the state by Golf Digest and a top 100 residential course in the country, South Shore Country Club is the first Jack Nicklaus signature design golf course in Nevada. An inspiration that reaches the tops of ridges before falling away down rugged canyons to the sparkling Lake Las Vegas below, this private club par 71 masterpiece has generous fairways, up to 5 tee boxes per hole, and stunning water features. With its dramatic elevation change, incredible scenery, and immaculate conditions, South Shore Country Club ignites a golfer's passion and provides a peaceful escape. You might also be lucky enough to spot the bighorn sheep that have become frequent spectators on the course's spectacular finishing holes. For more information on the fantastic South Shore Country Club at Lake Las Vegas, visit South Shore CC LLV. That's South Shore CC LLV.com or call 702-804-6461 and tell them VSiN sent you. And with that, we want to bring in our guest for the member guest segment, Ryan Brickley, a second-time visitor to Long Shots. He was so good the first time around when we had a tournament in the Carolinas. We want to bring him back around. He's a PGA golf professional and sports bettor from the North Carolina area. And Ryan, thank you very much for joining us. You're familiar with the Wyndham Championship, not too far from home there in Greensboro. And what do you do with your handicap this week? I was asking my co-host Matt Humans. There's some pressure on some guys to keep their tour card and finish in the top 125. Would you be backing those guys or fading them this week?
Yeah, Brady. First, thanks for having me again. It's always a pleasure to be to talk a little golf. And yeah, I listened to your first segment, and I'm kind of right in line with what Matt's comments were earlier. From a prop standpoint, I'm kind of looking down the board a little bit at some of the guys in the 25 to 30, even 50 to 1 range. I think this tournament presents a lot of opportunities where, to your point, you've got guys that are just trying to make the top 125. You've got guys that are trying to make the FedEx playoffs. You've got guys that are trying to keep their card, and so it does create a lot of interesting pressure situations where who knows exactly how they're going to perform with that added element of pressure. I think it's interesting too. This field, there's a lot of names that your average PGA Tour fan probably isn't very familiar with. But as you know, when you handicap it like we do, you go a little bit deeper and you look at, strokes gained approach, for example, this week is one of the stats I really wanted to look at. This golf course is not really long by tour standards. It's going to be firm and fast, pending potential rain this week here. But it opens it up to a lot of guys that could perform well and could win. So I think it does make it a little bit more challenging to handicap the field. Again, particularly with a lot of names that we're not as familiar with and maybe don't have as consistent of a performance record, not just this season, but historical data over the years for us to go off of.
Yeah, Ryan, it kind of feels like a wide open tournament to me. I want to ask you about some of the young players here. Why would you think Victor Hovland is at 20 to 1 and Matthew Wolff is at 50 to 1 when Wolff's won a tournament this season? Does Hovland profile that much better for this tournament? And how about young guys like Cameron Smith and Joaquin Niemann?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would think that Hovland and Wolff would be almost the same number up there. So, I think maybe just the hunger factor a little bit. I think certainly Morikawa and Wolff both, are players that at least in my perspective, I'm going to, kind of pass on from a prop standpoint, just because I think they've, now with a win under their belt, it's easy for them to kind of relax a little bit and just kind of hit the cruise control. As where Hovland is still very, very hungry. He's got the pedigree to win on a big stage now, and it's just you're kind of waiting for that next young guy to break through. And I'm guessing that's just kind of factored into the line there. I have 3 guys that I've already got in pocket on, and as you talked about, you've already mentioned one of them twice, and that's Cameron Smith. He's a guy that's got the pedigree of competing for major championships already. He's placed very, very high in several big events. And so to me, this event is a little bit lower profile, but certainly lines up very well for him. the way that he's played over the last couple of years to, finally go ahead and get a win under his belt. I got him at 32-1. He tied seventh here in Greensboro in 2017. Shot 63 twice on this golf course. And he's certainly a guy that I think could be be there on Sunday.
Okay, good.
Another guy that is got a lot of local ties. Carolina, went to school at Clemson. Is Lucas Glover, and you talk about a ball striker. This guy, if it weren't for the putter, he'd probably have 3 or 4 more wins on tour at least. But he's got 8 out of 10 cuts at the Wyndham. He's been healthy finally. He overcame some injuries from last year. He's played well all year. He's also another guy that lines up really well from a strokes gained approach standpoint. I think he's up in the top 25 on tour this year. He also shot a 60 on this golf course and missed like a ridiculously short putt to shoot 59 a couple years ago. So again, he's very familiar with the venue. So I've got a ticket on Lucas Glover at 50-1 as well.
Ryan, I want to talk about a couple local guys here, one being a favorite and one that's a big long shot this week. Of course, Webb Simpson is kind of the ultimate horse for course here and finished second last week in Memphis. As Brady said earlier, named his daughter Wyndham, so he is fond of this event. But also want to ask a little bit about his fellow Wake Forest alum and North Carolinian Bill Haas, who kind of seemingly has found his game a little bit. He fell off the radar this year. I know it was easy money almost to go against him in matchups earlier this season, but he seemingly has found his game. So give us an update or maybe your opinion of Bill Haas's chances this week at about 100-1.
Yeah, it's interesting. You guys, it's almost like I showed you my notes before we started today. Haas is definitely a guy that lines up well for this golf course. To your point, he's been kind of off the radar for a while. I didn't take Haas on the straight up win prop, but I did take him in a matchup. So I think he's a great player. I don't know what your matchup board looks like. The site that I use had him matched up against Nick Taylor. So I took Haas at about even money against Nick Taylor for a pretty nice bet there on a matchup. But yeah, definitely with the local flavor there, having gone to school right up the road at Wake Forest, lots of great vibes for Haas. There's no question that Webb Simpson, is the chalk here this week with his past track record on this golf course. But I think he's also the guy that as you look down this field, it's like, okay, he's not he doesn't line up as a Brooks Koepka type favorite. He's not a guy that you expect to dominate the tournament from wire to wire or anything. So. I certainly understand why he's the betting favorite, at least from a number standpoint. But I just think there's more value with other guys in an event where there's nobody that I feel like it's worth putting a major investment in.
Ryan Brickley is our guest. He's a PGA golf professional in the Carolina area, not too far from Greensboro, the site of the tournament this week, the Wyndham Championship. And Ryan, I want to ask you about another guy. We'll see if he's in your notes as well. I've seen his name bandied around by a lot of different people this week, and he's been playing pretty darn well. And that's Vaughn Taylor. His stats match up. He's 33rd on tour in birdies. He's 25th in driving accuracy, and we know this course requires driving accuracy. Also, scrambling is one of the main stats guys are looking at this week that's going to be key around Sedgefield Country Club. He's 40th on tour in scrambling and also 36th in par 4 scoring. Really good numbers for Vaughn Taylor. Been in pretty good form lately, and you can find him at 100-1.
Yeah, Brady, I think that's a great point. Vaughn is not somebody that I had on my list, but to your point, he's another one of those guys that kind of is a fringe PGA Tour player and doesn't seem to perform great in the big events. But I believe he's got maybe two wins on tour, maybe 3, and almost all of them have been in events kind of like the Wyndham here, where again, it's not a superstar type field, but his game lines up very nicely. He's also a resident here in the South. I think he lives down in Augusta, Georgia. And yeah, his game certainly sets up well for this golf course, and he's certainly very familiar with it, just because he's one of those guys that, that doesn't get into some of the major events during the year and ends up, kind of fighting for his tour card. So he's been in this spot before, and I certainly would expect him to play well this week.
Ryan, also wanted to get your opinion. I know we're 9 months away with the schedule being so compressed and the majors really kind of front-loaded. and we're 9 months away from the Masters, but the Westgate Superbook USA have put out the odds this week, and Brooks Koepka, of course, is the current favorite at 8-1. And I know it's so early, but have you kind of maybe started to think a little bit about who might be a good guy to win the Masters for next year?
Yeah, I think it's with the final major still so fresh in our memory. It's easy to get ahead of ourselves and think about, again, Koepka, I think obviously is presented himself now as the first person you're going to think of at almost any major for the near future. But I think the other guy that's easy to overlook, and it just seems like he never plays well on the big stage anymore, is McIlroy. But every time I think Augusta now, I just think about, it's the one major he doesn't have, and it's also the one that he kind of let slip out of his hands, and he had it right there with 9 holes to go. I forget what year it was, but Rory is definitely the guy that I would line up behind him. There's so many other guys that play well at Augusta. Dustin Johnson has had a very down year by his standards this year, so I would look for Dustin to kind of take the off season and get refocused and be ready at Augusta as well. Obviously, those are 3 very, very chalky type of picks, but at this point I think it's just too hard to say, because there'll be many guys that'll come into form over the winter and maybe make a charge by the time we get to April.
Ryan, before we let you go, I want to talk about Brooks Koepka just for a second. Of course, he is the favorite to win the Masters next year at 8-1, and I think what we saw this past weekend at TPC Southwind, winning the WGC FedEx St. Jude, he has become that dominant player, and I think it is now. I mean, you looked at him in that final pairing against Rory McIlroy, and Koepka had the confidence. He knew he was going to win that when he stepped onto the tee. I think we're getting into the territory of Tiger Woods back in the day, when this guy is starting to intimidate people. Would you agree?
Absolutely, and you're the only person in my memory that I can think of where the rest of the field was that intimidated, obviously, was Tiger. And the thing that's kind of scary to me is I think that Koepka, one of the traits that you talk about from just a lot of the sports psychologists talk about is what they call detachment, and basically not being emotionally attached to the outcome of your performance. And that's what I see from him. It's almost like he's a robot when he's out there. He's said publicly that he doesn't even really like golf that much. It just kind of pays the bills. And so I think he's able to compartmentalize the pressure that maybe gets to a lot of these other guys, where they're thinking, oh, how prestigious is it to have a claret jug and a green jacket and these kind of things. And to Brooks Koepka, I think it's just a way to make a living, and obviously he's extremely good at it. But it just seems like he's not too. He's never going to let the emotions get in the way of his performance, and that's a huge asset in golf.
Oh, great stuff. I think well said there. Ryan, thank you for being a 2-time guest this season on Long Shots, and we'll look forward to speaking with you again next year. Enjoy the Wyndham Championship this weekend.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me, and best of luck this weekend.
All right, sounds good. We'll come back, and we'll talk a little bit about the final major of the year. Keep it here on VSiN, VSiN.com, and SiriusXM Channel 204.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
How much in the terms of momentum or legs does the 18-game, 16 per player maximum have?
I can't imagine that Tom Brady's going to miss 2 games. I just can't fathom that you have a starting quarterback and you got to rest him for 2 games. And what that would look like is everybody would rest their quarterbacks first 2 weeks of the season and then play the rest of the year. I mean, why I'm not, or maybe rest them in week 17 when the game doesn't matter if you think you can get there. But it's either early or late, but you can't rest them in October or November. There's too much at stake.
So is that shaded a little bit shorter, considering there's a lot of smart minds behind the Cornhuskers this year?
Well, let me give all the credit for all this college football stuff to Ed Salmons, our senior college football guy here at the Superbook. And I know Ed and I both really like Nebraska this season. Talk about a team that, as bad as they started, they closed out so well at the end of last year. Mm-hmm. And that's such a mark of a great coach. And Scott Frost did such a great job with Central Florida, and he really had that team turned around by the end of last season. I don't see any reason why Nebraska won't win the Big Ten.
Real quickly, we didn't touch upon Stanford, a team that's always a challenger in the Pac-12, but I think this is going to be a down year. They lose a ton of talent. One of my favorite players in college football last year, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, he's gone. I'm not going to discount, though, the job that their coaching staff does there.
Yeah, what they are is they are the outliers, right? So everybody's running spread, and they're in two tight ends running the ball, and their pad level's down. And so to get ready to play them, right, to get ready to play Stanford, you're a school that you're Arizona, and you're in spread all the time. How do you get your defense ready to play Stanford? You have no real players on your team that can show you what the offense looks like in a real concise manner and an effective manner. So they're the outlier. They were New England. New England became this last year. Who was running the football? And I think that's the big thing. I'm just not in love with KJ Costello. I mean, I know people have him as the second best. I don't. I mean, I think there's some issues with his accuracy, and I do think it'll be a down year. It'll be interesting to see where David is with this program right now.
Yeah, I agree.
David Shaw, I meant.
One of my favorite things about Stanford, they're like the service academies. You can always guarantee they're not going to get dumb penalties.
Yeah, that's right. Smart players.
Absolutely right.
I mean, what was your low? How bummed were you at that moment? Were you just super dejected, or were you okay with it?
It's a funny story. So right after the taping finished, and I kind of had to go sign my forms to collect my second place money, one of the producers came up to me and she gave me a hug, and she actually started crying because she said she had never seen anyone play the game so beautifully before, and I had to kind of pat her on the back and comfort her.
That's amazing.
The experience was ending.
Wow.
But I would say it was kind of a bittersweet moment. Obviously, I wasn't happy to lose, but at the same time, it was getting a little stressful going back there every week, and I was kind of like I had put this achievement, checked it off the bucket list.
Welcome back to Long Shots, VSiN's weekly golf betting show. Now, back to your betting caddies, Brady Cannon, Matt Humans, and Wes Reynolds.
A course that rates the highest in each factor is Bali High Golf Club, a tropical golf course paradise located on the Las Vegas Strip and in the shadows of some of the most famous hotels in the world. At Bali High, designed by award-winning architects Brian Schmidt and Lee Curley, you will find hundreds of mature palm trees, lagoon-like water features, beautiful bunkering, and a stunning clubhouse home to Sealy Restaurant and an indoor-outdoor patio experience and event space. The course offers Bluetooth technology, caddies upon request, Jell-O shots, model-like beverage cart staff, VIP service from curb to course and back again, high-quality food and beverage, and a par 3 challenge where you can double your money with one swing. The stunning Bali High Golf Club, located in the heart of the Las Vegas Strip, is a golf jackpot, and there are many reasons why. Play today. To learn more about the Bali High experience or reserve your tee time, call 702-450-8000 or visit BaliHighGolfClub.com. That's BALIHAI golfclub.com. And this, of course, is our major implications segment. And the next major on the board is the Masters. We just spoke briefly about the Masters, looking ahead to that odds board with Ryan Brickley for a moment. But, gentlemen, I also want to look towards some of the bigger events happening here down the stretch of this season. Of course, we've got the end of the regular season happening this week at the Wyndham, and then we have some awards to be handed out. You've got the PGA Tour Rookie of the Year, you've got the Player of the Year, and eventually, 3 weeks from now, we will have the FedEx Cup champion. Brickley just talked about it there on the air, that Brooks, maybe he just doesn't care about all this stuff, but he's got to be the favorite. He's leading the FedEx Cup point race right now off of that victory in Memphis. And Wes, I would think he's the favorite to win another $10 million at the end of the year.
Yeah, you would certainly think so. And I mean, I think it's pretty much settled that he should be the Player of the Year. I mean, the fact that he was a contender pretty much in every
Second
single
at the
major.
Masters, right?
Yeah, I mean, his worst major was the Open Championship, where he still finished, I believe, top 5.
I was going to say, was he 4th or something?
Yeah, and he was right there at the U.S. Open with Gary Woodland. Actually shot the lowest 36 holes over the weekend, and then winning a WGC event. I mean, you have to consider him, I think, the Player of the Year, and maybe somebody down the board wins the FedEx Cup and wins the $10 million. But I think he's done enough to prove that he's the Player of the Year.
He is the Player of the Year. There's no question. It's not Rory after what Rory did at the British. Koepka 2-1. How about that number? 2-1
to win the FedEx Cup. What about Woodland, though, Matt? You were right there front and center at Pebble Beach. He wins his first major, the U.S. Open at Pebble Beach. If he was to go on and win the FedEx Cup, he's in the conversation for Player of the Year.
He's definitely in the conversation because you won the U.S. Open as well as that. How can you not be? Like you said, Dustin Johnson, I agree, has had a down year. I don't really consider him to be a guy in that conversation right now. Where's Tiger? He's a long shot. He after the Masters, he faded into oblivion.
He hasn't done anything,
and
right?
was no factor the rest of the year. It's almost like, well, I won my major, I'm done for the year.
He didn't even play that much after the Masters. He did not play before the PGA.
Right.
He played the Memorial, right? He played the U.S. Open. He didn't play before the British. And I mean that's all he's played.
Yeah, he has been very inactive, and I don't know if it's an injury thing or if it's just maybe he's tired or doesn't feel his game's in good shape, so he decided to take a pass and go at it for the next year. But the fact of the matter is, he's in another change in the schedule. His foundation is now the host at the Genesis Open. It is now the Genesis Invitational out at Riviera in Los Angeles. So
one of my favorite tournaments.
That at least gives that event even a nice shot in the arm having him there. But yeah, nobody else just has really had that dominant year. There's been guys that have been kind of good for a couple weeks and then they go away. And Koepka's just been consistent throughout the calendar year. So he's rightfully the favorite and rightfully the guy to beat.
Wes, what about Rookie of the Year? You've got Cameron Champ, who won way back when. It's almost a year ago in Mississippi. Sungjae Im has been outstanding. He's had the most starts of any of the guys that are qualified for Rookie of the Year. He's had 6 top 10 finishes. Been a really good player. He'd be my vote right now. And then you've got the local guy, Wyndham Clark, and one of the guys you're on this week at the Wyndham, Sepp Straka, Wes.
Well, I've got to add a caveat, actually, to this Rookie of the Year that I just saw before the show. You have to play 10 events. I believe that was the requirement to qualify for the award. But Matt Wolff and Colin Morikawa are going to be added to potentially earn the Rookie of the Year after they're officially in the 125, which they will be for next week for the FedEx Cup. So they are now being considered for Rookie of the Year, and those would be my 2 top choices, and Morikawa would be my personal pick. Now, Victor Hovland can also get in that discussion, but he has to win or finish in a 2 or 3-way tie for second to qualify to get in that 125. For the FedEx Cup. But yeah, this was changed because I was looking at this earlier today, and Morikawa would be my guy. And I looked at some of the stats that the senior editor of PGA Tour, Sean Martin, posted earlier this week. You don't see him on the stat boards because Morikawa hasn't played enough events. He's number 1 on tour in scoring average, 67.9, 74.1% GIR, that's first on tour, 4.9 birdies around, first on the tour, 1.42 strokes gained approach, that's first on the tour, second on the tour in strokes gained total, and he's only 100th in strokes gained putting. So the guy's not even putting that great, and he's winning. Granted, these were on some easy courses this summer, but you can't argue how good this guy is, and I think the sky's the limit for him as well.
He's a Cal Bear. I don't know if I like the way they've changed that rule that he can all of a sudden become PGA Tour Rookie of the Year.
Because these guys did turn pro late. I think these guys all turned pro.
Right after the U.S. Open or so?
Morikawa turned in Canada, and then Wolff and Hovland made their official pro debut at the Travelers in Connecticut the week after the U.S. Open. But yeah, if Morikawa, if indeed these guys do qualify, which it says right here that they would, Morikawa would be my pick.
Well, from what I hear, the guys on tour watch this guy hit the golf ball, and they say he just never misses a shot. Just an absolutely pure ball striker, and certainly he's got success to prove it. Wes, talk to us about the final major of the year a little bit. The women will conclude the major golf season in Europe this week for the Women's British Open.
Yeah, they are playing at, I believe it is Woburn Golf Club is where they're playing this year, and that's actually the home course of Ian Poulter. And they have one touring professional.
Sometimes Poulter dresses like a woman. Can he play in this?
He might have a chance to get a win for us since we didn't cash any tickets on him earlier in the year when he was striking the ball great. But it's at Woburn Golf Club. The co-favorites are Jin Yun Ko, Aria Jitanagarn. Jitanagarn actually won on this course, this event, 3 years ago in 2016. Jin Yun Ko has a chance to make some history here, though. She can be join this exclusive list of Babe Zaharias, Ben Hogan, Mickey Wright, Pat Bradley, Tiger Woods, and Inbee Park as the only professional golfers ever to win 3 majors in a calendar year. She, of course, won the event at the Avion and also won the Anna Inspiration. Much to my chagrin, I had the two down below those two, Hooju Kim and Sung Young Park, leading going into the final round by 3 shots over the field. They couldn't get it done. But this week, I'm going to go with a little local flavor here. Inbee Park, 16-1. She is finally finding her game. She, of course, is a resident.
Went to Bishop Gorman High School.
Yeah, resident here in Las Vegas. Won this back at 2015 at Turnberry. 5 top 10s in the last decade in the Women's British Open, and 2 straight top 10s in majors. Look, she had some injuries over the last couple years, which kind of took her out of the mix. But I think she's back. Shan Shan Feng is another one I like that plays very well at the British Open. Top 7 the last 3 times in the last few years here at the Open. And then I want to go with a couple long shots. One being, ironically enough, a Wake Forest grad, as the Wyndham is near Wake Forest.
Week for Wake Forest.
Yeah, Jennifer Kupcho, 60-1. She was the NCAA champion last year and also won the Augusta Women's Amateur. She finished second last week at the Avion and shot the lowest round of the field on a Sunday with a 66 in some pretty tough conditions. She's somebody I like, and then I'm going to go with a local angle. The touring professional for women at Woburn Golf Club is Charlie Hall, who has been on the Solheim Cup European team, 60-1. She has been a member of this course since she was 11 years old.
Wow.
So she is very talented. She's only 23 years old, and the first time she played this a couple years ago, I think the pressure kind of got to her. She ended up 17th, and she didn't want any of her family or her friends around, probably kind of overthought it. But I think she's going to be a little under the radar this week and kind of maybe appreciate the moment a little bit more, and I would expect her to be on the first page of the leaderboard on Sunday.
Brady, I hope the next time we talk about the women's tournament, the West does a little bit of research and shows up prepared, because that was weak.
That was a little light.
Yeah.
But seriously, though, pay attention to what Wes has to say. What was it, the U.S. Open that you hit the winner, correct?
It was Zhang Enli 6, who is probably going to win the Rookie of the Year on the LPGA Tour. But been doing okay in these majors, man. Maybe I should do the women's tournaments more than the PGA tournaments, because the winning percentage is a little bit higher, I can tell you that.
Well, if you're reading Point Spread Weekly, you can see all of Wes's alternate tour write-ups, European Tour week to week, also the ladies, the seniors. Wes does a great job there in Point Spread Weekly. Of course, I cover the PGA Tour, and he covers everything else and has picked a few winners along the way. We'll try and pick some winners for the Wyndham Championship when we come back. We'll all have our plays, our futures, our head-to-head matchups right here on Long Shots. Keep it here on VSiN, VSiN.com, and SiriusXM Channel 204.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
Defensively, this is a good football team, and Fangio will make them. They'll create some turnovers with his pressure and his way to, you got Von Miller on one side and Bradley Chubb on the other. That's going to be, and then you're playing an altitude up there. Look, they're 6-10 last year, and you and I watched it repeatedly at the Oceans, right? How many games did Vance Joseph mess up for him?
Yep, I would say off the top of my head 5.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we sat there and like, what are you doing? And I think if they just don't lose games, there's Belichick talks about this all the time. We have to avoid losing before we can win.
So children's books, because they cover a wide variety of subjects in a succinct manner. That was sort of your hack on that. You also, there's a lot of literature, for instance, that is asked about on Jeopardy. You're not reading entire books. What was your sort of shortcut for that?
Well, there's a lot of material out there for everything. They have these people who draw. I would say they draw up like an animated summary of a Shakespeare play that boils down into a 7-minute video you can watch on YouTube. If you're able to process that and you don't want to actually read the Shakespeare play like me, then most of the nuts and bolts of what Hamlet is about are on there.
How much in the terms of momentum or legs does the 18-game 16 per player maximum have?
I can't imagine that Tom Brady's going to miss 2 games. I just can't fathom that you have a starting quarterback and you got to rest him for 2 games. And what that would look like is everybody would rest their quarterbacks first 2 weeks of the season and then play the rest of the year. I mean, why I'm not or maybe rest them in week 17 when the game doesn't matter if you think you can get there. But it's either early or late, but you can't rest them in October or November. There's too much at stake. You got Zeke. You can't get into a 7-man box down there because they'll run it down your throat. So obviously, it's got to come off the passing game or some other way. Do they have an answer for it down there?
Yeah, Michael, they really, they really struggled, as you mentioned, with that. Some great numbers that you just threw out there. And, you're absolutely right. They missed a really point of attack blocker. They're tight end. They used to have a combination, even old man Jason Witten and then, James Hanna. When they had James Hanna, and then James Hanna retired, James Hanna was kind of a stunt man. He's like, okay, they take the actor out, they put the stunt man in, and, he does all the dirty work. And they missed a guy like that. They didn't have that ability to really control the point of attack.
Welcome back to Long Shots, VSiN's weekly golf betting show. Now, back to your betting caddies, Brady Cannon, Matt Humans, and Wes Reynolds.
It is the match play segment where we hand out our head-to-head matchups and plays for the week. We'll go over the futures, also a head-to-head matchup or two from my partner Wes Reynolds. You can follow him on Twitter at Wes Reynolds1 and Matt Humans at Matt Humans 24/7. You can find me at Las Vegas Golfer. Wes, we'll start with you. I know we went over your women's British Open plays in the last segment, but what do you have for this week as far as futures at the Wyndham Championship?
Okay, let me go ahead start with the futures.
Only like 18 plays this week.
Yeah,
huh?
I know. Patrick Reed, Brady and I concur on that. 20-1, really has played well. Was 5th in Detroit, which Sedgefield, of course, this week, a Donald Ross course like we saw at Detroit at the Rocket Mortgage, so I like that. I've mentioned Reeve 40, Piercy at 50, Henley at 60. Kevin Streelman was another kind of a stat sheet stuffer that I saw this week, so I took a shot at 70-1. Doc Redman 80-1. Bill Haas and Sepp Straka. Sepp Straka 12th and 3rd, respectively, in his last 2 events, peaking at the right time. Talented rookie from Austria. Hasn't gotten in the winner's circle yet, but those 2 guys are worth stabs at 100-1 this week, I think.
Matt, you've got a few as well there on the futures
Looks
board.
like we have one common play, and that's Scott Piercy, right?
Yeah.
We've all got Piercy. He's 60-1 at the South Point, and I think that's a pretty good number. We've talked a lot about him, so I'll leave that one alone. I'm looking at a couple of young players here. I feel like this is more of a wide-open tournament. Like I said, driving distance, not a big deal this week. Joaquin Neiman, 40-1. Cameron Smith, 40-1. I really feel like these guys are going to be in contention to win a lot of tournaments in the near future. 2 of the best young players on tour. In a tournament like this, I'm looking to hit some sort of score at a pretty good price, and I don't want to play any of the favorites. So Neiman, Smith at 40-1, Piercy at 60.
I agree with all those plays, Matt. And Cameron Smith has really been like the tale of 2 seasons. He was awful at the beginning of the season. And then I want to say in the last month, I mean, this guy, all of a sudden, he showed up on the leaderboard of the British Open.
I know.
Been playing very well. He had a great Masters, not this year, but the year before. He's got a ton of talent, the Australian Cameron Smith, and I almost put him on my card this week as well. And Ryan Brickley talked about him, one of the guys that he has in pocket. I don't think that's a bad play at all. We'll take a look at Cameron Smith this week. I'm on Scott Piercy as well. His stats really line up. He hits the ball very accurate off the tee. He's 11th on tour in greens in regulation, 21st in scrambling. He really makes all the sense in the world as far as the stats this week. Now, he is well inside the 125 number. His spot is secure as far as his tour card and the playoffs and everything, so he doesn't have that type of pressure on him. And I kind of feel that's a good thing. I think the winner is going to come from somebody that is established and not one of those guys that is kind of fighting for their tour lives this week. Wes, would you concur with that? Would you rather have a future play on a more established winner or a guy that's going to be pressing to keep his job?
I think you can be a little speculative this week and really get guys down the board. And one that you have, Brady, Vaughn Taylor, 100-1. When I was looking at some of the stats in terms of putting, in terms of proximity to the hole, he is really good. And those are kind of some afterthought stats after like GIR and strokes gained approach that Ryan Brickley mentioned. But those I think are important this week too. And Vaughn Taylor, he played well. He always plays well at the Barracuda, was solid last week. And I can't argue with that 100-1 there. I think that's good value.
Yeah, I think that price is a little high. I think he's got a better shot than 100-1. Ryan Brickley mentioned Lucas Glover, probably having the year of his career, just hasn't turned it into a victory just yet. He's got all the stats this week, and against a more diluted field, I like his chances here, and I like the number at 50-1. Let's go over the head-to-head matchups. We'll start with you, Wes. How about your head-to-head matchups?
Yeah, real quick, because I did probably too many. Glover minus 125 over Adam Hadwin. Joaquin Neiman, who Matt likes this week, 120 over Chucky Three Sticks. Reeve minus 140 over Cam Smith. Fading Victor Hovland in a couple matchups this week. Reed over him, Horschel over him. Doc Redman, who I like on the futures board. Horschel over Snedeker at minus 120. And then I'm going to take a hunch. Spieth was a late commit to this tournament, but he's got to be, I guessing, playing it for a reason. So I'm going to take a shot, plus 120 over Paul Casey.
Interesting. All right, Webb Simpson over Hideki Matsuyama. Webb minus 125. We talked about him and his history at this course. What'd you say, Brady? He named his daughter after?
He did. Wyndham. That's his daughter.
Simpson.
Boy.
And similar matchup with Wes here. We talked about this with Ryan. Lucas Glover profiles pretty well this week. And how about minus 115 over Adam Hadwin? So I'll go Simpson over Mats and Glover over Hadwin.
All right, and Kelly, did you have? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you had a matchup to throw at us there. But before I get to my head-to-head matchup, I also have Fat Pat on my futures board. He's really turned his season around and been playing very well the last 4 or 5 weeks, and he's won here before at the Wyndham. So I think he's got a shot at 20-1. And then I had Glover, Piercy, and Vaughn Taylor at 100. And then for my matchup, I'm going with Andrew Landry at minus 130 over Bo Hostler. And an interesting handicap here on this matchup. Andrew Landry is a very accurate driver of the golf ball. And if you look at some of the crossover courses this week, other Donald Ross designs, also 2 Pete Dye designs really cross over, TPC Sawgrass and also the RBC Heritage Harbortown. Bo Hostler has missed the cut at all those courses. Andrew Landry has made the cut at all those courses, and I think has the better stats that fit this golf course this week. He's laying a pretty decent price at minus 130, but I'll go with it. Just keep it here on VSiN. We'll be back next week. It's Long Shots.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
How much in the terms of momentum or legs does the 18-game, 16 per player maximum have?
I can't imagine that Tom Brady's going to miss 2 games. I just can't fathom that you have a starting quarterback and you got to rest him for 2 games. And what that would look like is everybody would rest their quarterbacks first 2 weeks of the season and then play the rest of the year. I mean, why I'm not, or maybe rest them in week 17 when the game doesn't matter if you think you can get there. But it's either early or late, but you can't rest them in October or November. There's too much at stake.
So is that shaded a little bit shorter considering there's a lot of smart minds behind the Cornhuskers this year?
Well, let me give all the credit for all this college football stuff to Ed Salmons, our senior college football guy here at the Superbook. And I know Ed and I both really like Nebraska this season. Talk about a team that, as bad as they started, they closed out so well at the end of last year. And that's such a mark of a great coach. And Scott Frost did such a great job with Central Florida, and he really had that team turned around by the end of last season. I don't see any reason why Nebraska won't win the Big Ten. I think it's called the Big Ten West.
You know, you got Zeke. You can't get into a 7-man box down there because they'll run it down your throat. So obviously, you know, it's got to come off the passing game or some other way. Do they have an answer for it down there?
Yeah, Michael, they really, they really struggled, as you mentioned, with that. Some great numbers that you just threw out there, and you're absolutely right. They missed a really a point of attack blocker. Their tight end. They used to have a combination. Even old man Jason Witten, and then James Hanna. When they had James Hanna, and then James Hanna retired. James Hanna was kind of a stunt man. He's like, okay, they take the actor out, they put the stunt man in, and he does all the dirty work. And they missed a guy like that. They didn't have that ability to really control the point of attack.
I mean, what was your low? How bummed were you at that moment? Were you just super dejected, or were you okay with it?
It's a funny story. So right after the taping finished, and I kind of had to go sign my forms to collect my second place money, one of the producers came up to me and she gave me a hug, and she actually started crying because she said she had never seen anyone play the game so beautifully before, and I had to kind of pat her on the back and comfort her.
That's amazing.
Experience was ending.
Wow.
But I would say it was kind of a bittersweet moment. Obviously, I wasn't happy to lose, but at the same time, it was getting a little stressful going back there every week, and I was kind of like I had put this achievement, checked it off the bucket list,